interesting because, as I mentioned before, the names tell the whole story. Mount Kilimanjaro and the Rwenzori can be found in Central Africa at the base of the Nile River. The original names tell the whole story. Look at this. The original name for Egypt was what? Kemet. And it means black nation or land of the blacks. Now, we're familiar with the word Egypt. It comes from a Greek Latin word, Aegyptos, which means land of the burnt-skinned people. So the original Kemet people were very clear about who they were and what they looked like. And the Greeks who came down into Egypt to study from our ancestors were very clear about who we were. It's interesting that when I turn on the History Channel, it's interesting that when I turn on the Discovery Channel, it's interesting that when I open National Geographic, there seems to be some type of confusion about who these people were and what they look like. We're going to break all that up this evening. Is that all right? I say? And see, that's why I come with the pictures, because a picture is worth what? 1,000 words. So even if you don't agree with what I say, you can't argue with the pictures that I'm about to show you. I say? So here we see just one of the examples of the ancient African origins of writing. Now this particular hieroglyph of what we call the Medu Neter, everybody say Medu Neter. Medu Neter means holy writings or sacred writings. It's also been translated to mean Word of God. And when we think Word of God, what do we usually think of? We usually think of the Bible. Y'all don't know that your ancestors wrote that too. I'm going to leave that for another discussion. I got a book back there called The African Origins of Our Faith. That's a whole other discussion. Okay? But here we see the ancient African origins of writing. And this particular hieroglyph can be found at a temple in Saqqara. Now I want to tell you how this began, the development of papyrus. Everybody say papyrus. This is where you get your word paper from. Our ancestors went down by the banks of the river Hapi, and the river Hapi was also called what? Come back to me now. Called the Nile. But the original name was Hapi. They cut down these large stalks of papyrus reed. And they would take them and they would lay them horizontally and they would lay them vertically. And then they would take a mallet-like instrument and begin to pound it to make it nice and what? Nice and smooth and nice and flat. Then they would set it out in the sun so that it could dry. And once they had done that, they knew that they had papyrus. This is the world's first piece of paper. Young people, anytime you pick up a newspaper, a magazine, a book, a workbook, your book of scriptures, anytime you have anything with paper, you should think of the gift of writing and paper that your ancestors gave to the world. Ashe? Now this is very important because there have been those pseudo-scholars who have said of African people, well, African people were pre-literate. Now it's interesting because one African scholar said that when he heard that, he didn't realize that it was pre-literate people who were calling him pre-literate. Ashe? Okay? And so here we see the scribes with the master teacher overlooking their work, much like I used to overlook the work of my students in my 14 years as a public school educator. Now I want to shift a little bit into mathematics for just a moment, because we're going to go further into Central Africa with the Ashango bone. The Ashango bone has been dated at 23,000 BC, which would make it just over 25,000 years old. Now it's interesting because if you don't know what you're looking at, you just say that that's a bone. But there have been studies that have been done on this bone, and you can see the markings and the notches in it. This isn't four separate ones, it's just different angles of the same bone. And it was found in northeastern Zaire. There are mathematical markings showing multiplication by doubling and prime numbers in this bone. Not only this, but it's not the only one that was found in there, and I'm told that there are bones that were dated at older than that were found. See, these are the things that oftentimes are not brought out because we are oftentimes led to believe that we had no culture prior to coming to America. Ashe? Ashe. But I come with numerous examples to prove my point. This is the Alms Mathematics Papyrus. What you're looking at is a portion of the oldest textbook in the world. It dates back to 1900 BCE, before the Common Era. This is just a small portion of it. It has over 80 math problems on it. Examples of algebra, trigonometry, sine, cosine, tangent, cotangent, square roots, area, circumference, and volume. And get this now, Amos, who wrote this, in the preface, in the title of his ancient mathematics textbook, he says that this is the correct method of investigating all things in order to know all things that exist each mystery and every secret. This is what your ancestors said about mathematics. So don't tell me you can't do mathematics. You are mathematics. Ashe? Mathematics is about pattern recognition. Mathematics is about understanding the interrelationship between things. And so as we look at this, you may not be able to read the writings of the Imhotep on here, but I know that you see some shapes that you recognize, don't you? What shapes do you recognize? Okay, so what do you think this ancient mathematics worksheet may have been used to create? Very good. Let's go a little further. Here you see the step pyramid at Saqqara. This is the world's first skyscraper. This is the world's oldest building made from hewn stone, dating back to 2630 BCE. And as I said, it can be found at Saqqara. And oh, wait a minute. Now, every time you see that handsome face, okay, I want you to replace that face with your own face, because you're going to go back and do as Dr. Chike Akua said, and rescue and reconstruct our culture. Ashe? And so we have a way for young people as well as adults to go back and actually do that. I've just come from my third trip to Egypt, where we take young people as well as adults, and just had a wonderful time. Once you go on that trip, you can never be the same. When you witness firsthand what our ancestors have done. I wanted you to see just how massive the step pyramid is, so I got right up on it so that you could see just how high it goes. Now we know that the step pyramid was constructed, designed by Imhotep. Everybody say Imhotep. Now historically speaking, Imhotep was the world's first recorded doctor. The world's first what? Recorded. In other words, there were other healers and practitioners before him, but he's the world's first what? Recorded doctor. He was also a mathematician. He was an advisor to King Zoser, who commissioned him to build the step pyramid. He was a priest. He was a poet. He was a multidisciplinary genius. Okay? But now I have a question for the young people. Because if you didn't already know this about Imhotep, many of you have heard this name before. And where have you heard the name Imhotep from? The movie The Mummy. Oh, I couldn't believe it. When that movie came out, my students came to me and told me how incredible that movie was. Mr. Akua, you got to see this movie. This movie is drunk. This movie is Titus, all that. I said, what's this movie about? They said, well, there's a guy named Imhotep. He was going through the movie, he was trying to kill people. It took place in ancient Egypt. I said, wait. Rewind. Hold on. A man named Imhotep was trying to kill people. And they said, yeah. I said, well, the historical Imhotep was the first recorded doctor, mathematician, advisor to King Zoser, priest, poet, multidisciplinary genius. It said, one movie, he was trying to kill people. I said, well, if what you're telling me is true, then that movie is an insult to African people and people of conscience. Oh, Mr. Akua, it's not that deep. It's just a movie. I said, no, it is that deep, and it's not just a movie. But they still weren't feeling me yet. So I said, well, what if 5,000 years from now somebody decides to make a movie? And the evil person, the evil character in the movie, let's say they give him a name like Martin Luther King or Booker T. Washington, since we're here at Tuskegee. What would you think about that? And they said, no, he can't do that. I said, why not? Because he was a good person. He tried to help people, tried to bring people together. I said, well, I just told you the historical truth about Imhotep, but if you don't know your history, people can tell you anything about your history. And here's what gets me, y'all. Have you pay your money to be insulted? Think about that now. That wasn't just one movie. How many were there? More than two. There was 3 of them. They made a whole multi-millions of them. People are making multi-millions of dollars off of our ignorance. Now, this is a medical